Welcome to the deep dive. Close your eyes for a second and picture it. You're standing on a piece of land under the California sun.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's that dream home overlooking the Pacific, a bustling commercial spot in the city, or just, a quiet patch of earth you want to build on.
Sounds nice.
It's the California dream of owning property.
Yeah.
Right. But here's the thing. What does owning that piece of the dream really mean deep down, beyond just having a paper deed?
Yeah, that feeling of possession is powerful, but you're right, the legal reality is far more intricate. It's not just the physical ground beneath your feet.
No.
It's really about a complex set of rights and rules
Hmm.
that define exactly what you can and can't do with that property and how it relates to everyone else.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Exactly. Think of owning California real estate not just as a physical object, but as like a structure built on foundational concepts. You see
Yeah.
the structure, the house, the land, but the whole thing rests on these hidden building
The
blocks.
foundation.
Right? The hidden foundations you absolutely must understand if you're going to navigate the real estate world successfully, whether you're buying, selling, or helping others do it.
And that's our mission today. We've pulled together a stack of resources, official California legal codes, guides from the Department of Real Estate, expert legal analyses, even, common explainers.
Okay.
And we're going to use these to unpack those essential building blocks of California property ownership, uncover some maybe surprising details, and show you why this isn't just dry legal talk.
It really isn't.
No, it's the absolute bedrock for confidence and, frankly, integrity in your real estate journey.
Let's start the very beginning then. What is property in a legal sense? Because historically, it wasn't just about the physical thing, was it?
That's a key insight from our sources, yeah. Historically, in English common law, property was less about the land itself and more about the rights you had in that land or item.
Right.
It was often described as a bundle of rights, the right to use it, sell it, lease it, mortgage it, keep others off it, and so on. A whole bundle.
A bundle of rights. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Almost like a package deal. And our modern concepts of real property and personal property, they actually grew out of this historical view.
Precisely. It came from the types of legal actions you could bring back then. If you were wrongly kicked off your land, you could bring a real action to recover the thing itself, the real property.
Like the land back.
Right.
Yeah.
But if your claim was only for monetary damages, like maybe someone broke something of yours, it was a personal action and the item was considered personal property.
Fascinating origin story. So real property meant you could potentially get the actual land back. Personal property meant you'd likely just get money. How do we define these today in California? Is it still that clear?
Well, modern California law defines property primarily in those two categories.
Yeah.
Real and personal. Real property is essentially land and things permanently connected to it. Our sources break it down into like four main parts.
4 parts. Okay.
Yeah. The land itself, then things permanently attached to the land. Third, things incidental or appurtenant to the land. And finally, things declared by law to be immovable.
Okay, let's zoom in on land. What's included there? Is it just the dirt?
It's more than just the dirt on the surface,
Mhm.
definitely. It includes everything below the surface, technically down to the Earth's center,
Wow.
and the space above the surface, essentially up to the sky.
Wait, so if I own land, I own the sky above it. Can I, stop airplanes from flying over my house?
Not quite. While you technically own the space above, courts recognize a public right to use airspace as a highway, basically,
Oh, okay.
as long as it doesn't unreasonably interfere with your use and enjoyment of your property. So
Mhm.
there's a balance there. You can't just put up a giant net.
Okay, that clarification is crucial. No giant nets. What about below the surface? You mentioned down to the center of the earth. What about oil and gas?
Right, this is where it gets interesting. Because oil and gas are, fluid, they move around.
Yeah.
You have the right to extract them by drilling vertically within the boundaries of your land,
Just straight down.
straight down. But you absolutely do not have the right to drill slantwise under your neighbor's property to capture resources over there. That's a no-go.
Yeah.
Your subsurface rights are defined by your property lines extending downward.
Got it. So land is surface, plus limits on the space above and below. Okay, second category. Things permanently attached, like buildings.
Exactly. Buildings, bridges, and trees are classic examples of things permanently affixed to the land. Then there are things permanently attached to those buildings, like built-in cabinets, doors, plumbing systems, heating systems, things that are integrated.
So the central air conditioning system is real property because it's permanently attached to the house, but maybe my window AC unit isn't.
That's a good example. The central system is pretty much always considered permanently attached. The window unit, Probably not. It's movable.
Okay, third category. Appurtenant or incidental to the land. This sounds a bit abstract. What does appurtenant mean?
Yeah, it is a bit abstract. It means something that belongs to and is used with the land for its benefit, even if it's not physically on the land itself. The key is it's tied to the land's use and value.
Okay, any examples? That might help.
Sure. Common ones from our sources include easements, like a right-of-way across a neighbor's property to access yours. That right benefits your land.
Right, so the right runs with the land.
Exactly. Or even stock in a mutual water company, if that stock is legally designated as appurtenant to your land. If it is, it often can't be transferred separately from the land itself.
Interesting.
The concept itself is defined as that which belongs to something else more worthy. It has to be a permanent addition, installed using permanent methods, and crucially, removing it would cause significant damage.
So it's something that enhances the land's value or usability and is considered legally connected to it, even if it's not physically touching.
Yes. Think of it as a right or item legally annexed or attached to the main property. And the fourth category, immovable by law, is basically a catch-all for anything else state statute specifically says is real property.
Right, so real property is land and things tied to it in various ways. That leaves personal property.
Personal property is, well, the simpler definition, it's anything that is not real property, basically the movable item.
Like my furniture, my car, my computer, that kind of stuff.
Precisely. Money, vehicles, furniture, equipment, and even intangible rights like choses in action.
Choses in action. What on earth is that?
Ah, yeah, sounds very old school legal, doesn't it? It's basically the right to recover money or personal property through a lawsuit. Like if someone owes you money on a promissory note, your right to sue for that debt is a chose in action.
So the right to sue is actually property, personal property.
Yep, it's classified as personal property. And that common term you hear, FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that usually refers to personal property items in commercial spaces. Things like desks, chairs, partitions, stuff that's not permanently connected.
Okay, FF&E is personal property, but you mentioned fixtures can be real property earlier when we talked about attachments. How does that work? That sounds contradictory.
Great question, because this is where personal property can become real property. It's a key transition point. A fixture is an item that started as personal property, movable stuff, but has been attached to the land or building in such a way that it's now considered legally part of the real property.
Ah, okay. Like that example of a freestanding fridge versus a built-in one. The freestanding one is personal property. You can just roll it out. The built-in one became a fixture.
Spot on. Exactly. And this is a huge area for disputes in real estate deals. Did that expensive chandelier or those custom-built shelves become fixtures, part of the house sale? Or can the seller just take them?
Right. I can see how that happens.
Oh.
How do courts decide?
Well, courts use 5 main tests to decide if something is a fixture. It's not always obvious.
5 tests. Okay, what do they look at?
First, the intention of the person who attached it. Did they mean for it to be permanent? That's often the most important factor.
Intent. Okay.
Second, the method of attachment. How permanently is it fixed? Is it bolted down, cemented in, maybe plastered over, or just hanging on a nail?
Degree of permanence. Makes sense.
Third, its adaptability to the property's use. Is it kind of necessary or highly beneficial to the way the property is ordinarily used? Think about that central AC again. Pretty adaptable, right?
Yeah, essential even.
Fourth, is there an agreement between the parties? Did the purchase contract specifically say the chandelier stays or goes? If so, that usually controls.
The contract is key.
Always. And fifth, the relationship between the people involved. Are we talking seller versus buyer or landlord versus tenant? The rules can differ.
How so? How does the relationship matter?
Well, tenants generally have a special right to remove trade fixtures, things they installed specifically for their business, as long as they remove them before the lease ends and don't damage the property doing it. That's an exception.
Ah, trade fixtures. Okay, that's a really helpful framework. So it's not just how it's attached, but why, how essential it is, what people agreed to, and who they are.
Precisely. It's a whole picture.
Yeah.
And understanding this difference between real and personal property and how fixtures are determined is really crucial. It impacts everything from what's included in a sale contract, how it's taxed, even the legal requirements for the transfer itself.
How so? Requirements for transfer.
Well, real estate sales generally require written contracts, the statute of frauds. Personal property rules are different, often less formal unless it's over a certain value. Plus, the location of the property dictates the governing law for real estate where it sits. Personal property laws can be more complex regarding location.
Okay, so knowing what property is real or personal and those tricky fixture nuances is absolutely fundamental. So, next building block, how property is owned. It's not always just one person holding the deed, right?
No, definitely not. It can be held in various ways depending on the owner's needs and goals. You can have sole ownership, which is simple. One person or entity holds the title. All the benefits, all the burdens, like taxes, fall to that one owner.
Straightforward. And when there's more than one owner, what's that?
That's concurrent ownership, simultaneous ownership by two or more persons. In California, the most common forms you'll see are tenancy in common, joint tenancy, and community property.
Okay, let's break those down. Tenancy in common. What's the key feature there?
In tenancy in common, multiple people own undivided interests in the property. They might have unequal shares, like one person owns 60% and the other 40%, but they both have the right to possess the whole property. The big takeaway here, though, is there is no right of survivorship.
No right of survivorship. That sounds important. What does it mean in practice if someone dies?
It means exactly that. If one tenant in common dies, their share doesn't automatically go to the surviving co-owners. Instead, it passes according to their will, or if no will, to their legal heirs. It usually goes through the probate process.
So it becomes part of their estate.
Exactly. And the new owner, whoever inherits it, then becomes a tenant in common with the original survivors. And interestingly, if a deed just names two or more people as owners without specifying how they own it, California law often defaults to tenancy in common.
Okay, so if, say, two business partners buy a building together and don't specify, they're likely tenants in common. If one passes away, the surviving partner doesn't get the whole building. The deceased partner's share goes to their family or whoever's in the will.
Correct. Now, compare that to joint tenancy. This is where the right of survivorship is the defining feature. It's completely different in that respect.
So in joint tenancy, the share does automatically go to the survivors. No probate.
Yes, precisely. When a joint tenant dies, their interest automatically and immediately vests in the surviving joint tenants, totally outside of the will and the probate process. It's a common choice for married couples or families who want that seamless transfer upon death.
That sounds much simpler for the survivors. Are there special requirements to create it?
Yes, there are. To create a valid joint tenancy, you traditionally need what are called the four unities.
For unities.
Interest, title, time, and possession. The owners must have the same type and amount of interest, so equal shares. They must acquire their title from the same source or document, title, at the same time, and they must have the same right to possession of the entire property.
Interest, title, time, possession, the four unities. Why are the specific requirements necessary? Seems a bit rigid.
Well, the law requires these four elements to be present simultaneously to really ensure that all owners truly hold the property under the exact same terms from the very beginning. It reinforces the idea that they are a single ownership unit, which makes that right of survivorship legally sound. If one of these unities is broken later on, it can actually sever the joint tenancy.
Sever it, you mean break it. Can a joint tenant just decide to break it?
Yes, absolutely. A joint tenant can sever the joint tenancy just for their own share. They can do this by selling or transferring their interest to someone else, or even transferring it to themselves to change the ownership form.
Interesting. So what happens then?
If you had two joint tenants, say A and B sells their share to C, then the joint tenancy is broken. A and C now own the property as tenants in common.
Ah, it converts.
Right. And if you had three joint tenants, A, B, and C, and A sells their share to D, then D owns a one-third interest as a tenant in common with B and C. But B and C, they still hold their combined two-thirds interest as joint tenants between themselves.
Wow, okay. That gets complicated quickly. Understanding severance is clearly crucial, especially for estate planning.
Very much so. And the third main type of concurrent ownership is community property.
Right, for married couples in California.
Yes. Generally speaking, any property acquired by a husband and wife during their valid marriage is considered community property, owned equally by both spouses.
Regardless of whose name is on the paycheck or the deed.
Generally, yes, if it was acquired using community funds or effort during the marriage. The main exceptions are separate property, stuff owned before the marriage, or received during the marriage, specifically by gift or inheritance. That usually remains the separate property of that spouse.
So the salary earned by either spouse during the marriage or a house bought with those earnings is usually community property.
Exactly. And our sources also briefly mention that legal entities like corporations or partnerships can own property in their own right. and that specific ownership interests in developments like condominiums and stock cooperatives are also defined as real property estates under California law.
Okay, that covers the different structures for how property can be owned. But even once you own it and you know how you own it, there might still be other people with claims or rights attached to that property, right? These are the invisible claims or encumbrances you mentioned.
Right. Owning property doesn't always mean owning it free and clear of any outside interests or claims. An encumbrance is basically a claim against a property held by someone who is not the property owner.
Okay, and they can affect the property.
Oh, definitely. They can impact its transferability, make it harder to sell, or restrict how the owner can use it. They can be significant burdens.
Like clouds on the title.
Exactly. Clouds on the title is a good way to think about it. And this is precisely why California's recording system is so vital. Since way back in 1850, we've had a public system to record documents that affect real property title.
And the purpose of that.
The main purpose is to put the world on notice, constructive notice, about who owns what and what claims exist against the property. It protects potential buyers and lenders, what the law calls innocent parties, from secret claims or undisclosed liens or encumbrances. It helps make property title freely transferable because people can check the record.
So by recording a claim, it becomes public knowledge, and generally the first one recorded has priority if there's a conflict.
That's the general rule, yes. Priority of recordation usually determines rights in conflicting claims. It makes those potentially invisible claims visible, at least to someone who checks the records.
Okay, so what kinds of encumbrances, these claims, might you see recorded? What are the common ones?
Well, a very common type is lien.
A lien, what exactly is that?
A lien is essentially a financial claim against a property. It's a type of security interest that gives the claimant, the lien holder, the right to seize the property or force its sale to satisfy an unmet obligation, usually a debt.
Okay, so it's about money owed, like a mortgage? Is that a lien?
A mortgage, or more commonly in California, a deed of trust, is the most common lien on real estate. The lender has a claim against the property until the loan is paid off.
Makes sense. What other kinds of liens are there?
Other examples include property tax liens. If you don't pay your property taxes, the government gets a lien. There are mechanics liens filed by contractors or suppliers who worked on the property but weren't paid. And judgment liens, which can arise from lawsuits. If someone wins a lawsuit against you, they might get a lien on your property to secure payment of the judgment.
Wow, okay. So liens are basically financial strings attached to the property. What else counts as an encumbrance?
An easement is another really significant one. We touched on this briefly with the pertinences. An easement gives someone else the right to use a portion of your property for a specific purpose. Or sometimes it prevents you, the owner, from using your property in a certain way.
Use or prevention. Can you give examples?
Sure. A common one is a utility company having an easement to run power lines or sewer pipes across your land. That's an affirmative easement. They have the right to do something.
Right.
Or maybe a neighbor has an easement, a documented right, to use a specific path across your backyard to get to a beach or a road. That might be an appurtenant easement benefiting their land.
And that passes with the land when it's sold.
Usually, yes, if it's appurtenant. An easement in gross, on the other hand, benefits a specific person or company, not a neighboring property, and typically doesn't automatically pass when the easement holder's property is sold.
Okay. And easements can be created in different ways.
Yes, they can be created by an express written agreement, or sometimes implied by circumstances, or out of necessity, like if a property is landlocked. You can even get one through long-term, open, and notorious use without permission. That's a prescriptive easement.
Like using a path for years without anyone stopping you.
Kind of, yes, though the legal requirements are specific, so someone else could have a legal right to use part of your property. What about actual physical intrusions?
Good question. That brings us to encroachments. An encroachment happens when something physically extends from one property onto a neighboring property, crossing the boundary line.
Like a fence built in the wrong place.
Exactly.
Or part of a building, a driveway, even overhanging tree branches sometimes. Technically, it's a form of trespass if it's on the ground, or a nuisance if it's in the air. It creates an encumbrance on both properties until it's resolved, because it clouds the issue of the true boundary and property use.
I can see how those lead to neighbor disputes. Fences, trees, happens all the time.
It really does. Those common real-world issues often boil down to easements or encroachments, which highlights why understanding these rights and boundaries is so practical, not just theoretical.
Definitely. What about a lease? Is renting out my property an encumbrance?
Yes, a lease is also considered an encumbrance. While you, the owner, still hold the title, your right to use and possess the property is significantly constrained by the tenant's rights under the lease agreement. They have a legal right to be there.
Right, I can't just walk in whenever I want.
Exactly. And one more type, restrictive covenants.
Covenants, like rules.
Yes, basically. These are limitations on how a property can be used, often found written into the deed itself or in the governing documents for a homeowners association, the CC&Rs. Think rules about minimum house size, architectural styles, maybe what color you can paint your house, or restrictions on running a business from home.
Okay. But are all restrictions allowed?
No. Critically, California law is very clear that any covenant that restricts the sale, lease, or use of property based on discriminatory factors like race, color, religion, sex, gender, ancestry, national origin, disability, medical condition, genetic information, marital status, sexual orientation, or citizenship, those are absolutely legally void and unenforceable.
That's a crucial legal safeguard. So liens, easements, encroachments, leases, restrictive covenants, these are all potential claims or limitations that can impact ownership and really need to be understood by buyers, sellers, everyone involved.
Absolutely.
And the document that actually transfers ownership, the deed, plays a key role in how these claims are handled, right?
It really does. Deeds are the legal instruments used to transfer title to real property. For a deed to be valid in California, it generally needs to meet several requirements. It must be in writing, signed by the person granting the property, the grantor. It must clearly identify the grantor and the recipient, the grantee, adequately describe the property being transferred, contain words indicating the intent to grant.
Okay.
And crucially, it must be legally delivered by the grantor and accepted by the grantee.
Delivery and acceptance, isn't that just, handing over the paper?
You'd think so, but legally it's more than just the physical handoff. Legal delivery requires the grantor to have the intention to pass title right now, immediately.
Ah, the intent again.
Yes. If you hand someone a deed but say, "This is yours only when I die," that's generally not a valid delivery for an immediate transfer of ownership while you're alive. You need genuine intent for present transfer. Conditional deliveries directly to the grantee are usually ineffective. Conditions need to be in the deed itself or handled through an escrow.
Okay, that makes sense. And getting it notarized, is that required?
Notarization or acknowledgement isn't technically required for the deed to be valid between the grantor and grantee, but it is generally required for the deed to be recorded in the public records. And recording is what provides that vital public notice about the transfer and protects the grantee's claim against later claims.
Got it. So, notarized to record, recorded to protect. And different types of deeds offer different levels of protection or assurance about these potential claims we've discussed.
Exactly. The most common type used in California sales is the grant deed. When a grantor uses a grant deed, the law implies certain warranties, even if they're not written out.
Implied warranties? Like what?
Primarily that the grantor hasn't already sold the property to someone else, and that the property isn't burdened by any encumbrances, liens, easements, etc. that were placed on it by the grantor or anyone claiming under them, unless disclosed in the deed. It offers a decent level of protection focused on the grantor's own actions.
Okay, so it's not a guarantee against all possible claims, just those connected to the seller.
That's generally right. Compare that to a quitclaim deed. This type of deed transfers only whatever interest, if any, the grantor currently has in the property at that moment. It comes with no implied warranties whatsoever.
No warranties? Why would anyone use that?
Well, it's often used to clear up potential minor title issues or clouds on the title, maybe remove a former spouse's potential interest after a divorce, or transfer property between family members where warranties aren't a big concern. A buyer in a typical arm's-length transaction gets much less protection with a quitclaim deed.
Okay, that's clear. Grant deed gives some promises, quitclaim gives none. What about a trust deed? That sounds like it transfers property into a trust, maybe for estate planning.
This is a super common point of confusion. A trust deed, or more accurately a deed of trust in California, is not a deed used to transfer ownership like a grant deed or quitclaim deed. Despite the name, it has nothing to do with putting property into a living trust.
No. Then what is it?
It's actually a security instrument, very similar to a mortgage. It's typically a three-party document involving the borrower, trustor, the lender, beneficiary, and a neutral third party, trustee. The borrower temporarily gives the trustee a limited form of legal title, really just the power to sell the property, only if the borrower defaults on the loan owed to the lender.
Ah, so it's about securing the loan, making the property collateral.
Exactly. It's used to make the property collateral for the loan. Once the loan is paid off, the trustee reconveys the title back to the borrower, clearing that encumbrance. It doesn't transfer ownership in the way we usually think of deeds.
That's a really critical distinction. Okay, wow. So we've navigated quite a bit here. What property actually is, legally speaking.
Real versus personal, and those tricky fixtures.
Right. Then who can own it and the different ways they can hold title together.
Sole ownership, tenancy in common, joint tenancy, community property.
Uh-huh. And finally, all those invisible claims or encumbrances that can affect the property, liens, easements,
This
encroachment.
is a bird in the title.
So let's tie it all together. Why does digging into these fundamentals matter so much for you, our listener, whether you're just starting out or you're deep into the California real estate world?
Because these concepts aren't just academic exercises, right?
Hmm.
They are the absolute foundational language and the very structure of every single real estate transaction. Every deal relies on understanding these pieces.
How so, in practice?
Well, understanding the difference between real and personal property prevents arguments over whether the stove or the curtains stay or go. Knowing the implications of different ownership types helps clients make crucial decisions about estate planning, liability, and how they want the property handled if one owner dies.
Yeah, those are major decisions.
Huge. And recognizing and identifying encumbrances during due diligence is absolutely essential for ensuring clear title, pricing the property correctly, and preventing nasty surprises or legal headaches down the road for the buyer.
So, knowing this stuff helps you draft clearer contracts, anticipate potential issues before they blow up into full-blown problems, and basically guide clients confidently and competently through the whole process.
Absolutely. Mastering these seemingly complex legal ideas builds your competence, it helps prevent disputes between parties, it facilitates smoother, faster transactions, and ultimately, it fosters the trust that is just paramount in an ethical and successful real estate career.
It's the difference between just processing paperwork and truly understanding the asset, the rights, and the risks involved.
Couldn't have said it better. That's
Yeah.
the bedrock. You really can't build a lasting career or make consistently smart property decisions without having a solid grasp on this foundation.
Agreed. It empowers you, and by extension, it empowers the clients and people you work with. Okay, so to recap, we've covered the historical roots of property as a bundle of rights, the modern legal distinctions in California between real and personal property, including fixtures, the various ways people can hold title together, like tenancy in common versus joint tenancy, and the critical importance of understanding and identifying those invisible claims like liens and easements that can encumber a property.
Giving you, hopefully, the essential building blocks to really understand California property ownership from the ground up.
So if property ownership began historically as that bundle of rights, essentially a collection of legal permissions and restrictions associated with a thing, here's a thought to maybe leave you with.
Okay.
As technology evolves and our society changes, constantly creating new potential uses or impacts on land. Think about airspace for drones, subsurface rights for things like carbon capture, maybe even data generated by a property. How might that historical bundle of rights continue to be redefined, stretched, and reshaped in the future? What new sticks might be added to the bundle or maybe taken away?
That's a fascinating question. It suggests the conversation about what property rights truly mean is clearly far from over. It
Yeah.
keeps evolving.
Absolutely. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Our pleasure. Always enjoy digging into the foundations.